Mr. President, last December, I came to the floor to discuss the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee investigation into for-profit online colleges and universities. It's an investigation that's now been going on for almost a year, and it's an investigation with profound consequences for the taxpayers of this country. The for-profit colleges, mostly online, receive more than $26 billion in federal student aid each year. Now, while some of these schools may be doing a good job, taxpayers deserve to know that their education dollars are being well spent. There's also an investigation with profound consequences for students. According to data released last week by the Department of Education, 25% of for-profit college student loan borrowers default within 3 years of leaving school. Let me repeat that. 1 out of every 4 student loan borrowers that go to these for-profit schools default within 3 years of leaving school. For-profit colleges have correctly pointed out that they educate a disproportionate number of low-income and minority students. And they argue that if they weren't doing a good job, students would not continue to enroll. How then is it possible that schools with very high rates of withdrawal, high rates of loan debt, and high rates of default continue to enroll more and more students each year? The answer, according to my committee's investigation, lies in the enormous expenditure of money and effort that the for-profit colleges put into their recruitment process. There have been many stories about abusive recruitment practices in newspaper and television programs across the country. Last August, the Government Accountability Office documented many of those abuses in undercover videos that were presented at a HELP committee hearing. The industry argued that these misleading and deceptive practices were the work of a few rogue actors. But the overwhelming evidence of misleading, deceptive, and even fraudulent conduct documented by GAO cannot be attributed to anything but a systemic effort to enroll students at any cost. For anyone who questions that this is a systemic effort to pressure, deceive, and mislead, I want to take a few minutes this evening to explore the details of the training practices that led directly to the GAO findings. I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and both sides of the Capitol find this a useful window into the training tactics used by these companies. One of the most common words in the proprietary school industry's recruiting documents is the word pain. Pain. Now, it's not the first word that might come to someone's mind when they think about enrolling in college, or when you might think of your son or your daughter enrolling in college. You wouldn't think of pain as the first word. However, perhaps nothing worthwhile was ever accomplished without effort, so you might be thinking that schools are talking about preparing students for the hard work and the pain of excelling in college. The reality is quite the opposite. The proprietary higher education companies want to make college seem easy. The reason they're focusing on pain is to try to get students to enroll. Let me go on with this. Consider this quote from a memo written by a director of recruitment at a campus of ITT, one of the largest of the for-profit schools. After falling short of the required quota of starts, I put that in quotation marks, after falling short of the required quota of, quote, starts, end quote, that's the industry term for new students, the recruiter writes, the department needs to focus on the selling of the appointment by digging in and getting to the pain of each and every prospective student. By getting to the pain, the representatives will be able to solidify the appointments and have a better show rate for the actual conducts. Another example from an ITT document about what recruiters should do to keep students in class. And I'm reading now from one which I will put in the record. It says, remind them of what things will be like if they don't continue forward and earn their degrees. Poke the pain a bit. Poke the pain a bit and remind them who else is depending on them and their commitment to a better future. Poke the pain. In their training, ITT went beyond rhetoric and created what they call a pain funnel. Now, it's probably hard to see it on this piece of paper. I'll try to get this inserted in the record, but it's a picture of a funnel, and it's called the Pain Funnel and Pain Puzzle. It illustrates 4 levels of pain with questions that are supposed to get progressively more hurtful to the student, the prospective student. Level 1 starts off with questions like, tell me more about that. Can you be more specific? How long has it been a problem? Level 2, what have you tried to do about that? What have you done to fix it? Level 3, pain. Level 3, pain. How do you feel about that? And then it gets down to level 4, the recruiter's asking questions like, have you given up trying to deal with the problem? A different document from ITT goes through the same levels of pain. The level 4 question is once again, what are you willing to change now, or have you given up trying to deal with the problem? The problem. What's the problem? The problem is this young person is out of work. They have no future. They probably have a high school degree, maybe a D average high school, C average at the most. They've answered an ad. The recruiter's talking to them, and they're stoking the pain. And the last thing they say, okay, what are you willing to do to change it, or are you just going to give up on it? Well, that's the question I'd like to ask the executives who believe that preying on past failures is a sound method for enrolling students or a reasonable way to run a college. According to the Department of Education, 30% of student loan borrowers at ITT, the one I just quoted, default within 3 years of leaving school. And most of them leave before they ever get any kind of degree. They're there for a few weeks, maybe a few months. But get this, when they drop out and when they default, ITT keeps the money. ITT keeps the money. Kaplan University also encourages its recruiters to focus on pain and fear. In a page from a manual dated July the 8th of 2009, with side notes about advisor call control and maintaining rapport with the prospect. The document is similar to ITT's with questions to uncover the pain and the fear. Uncover the pain and the fear. At the bottom, in big capital letters, it's all about uncovering their pain and fears, underlined. Once they are reminded of how bad things are, this will create a sense of urgency to make this change. 16 pages of sales tactics later, the recruiter is taught to, quote, restate back word for word, the better you restate, the brighter the dream, end quote. Another Kaplan document says, keep digging until you uncover their pains and their fears. Keep digging until you uncover their pain, their fears, their dreams. If you get the prospect to think about how tough their situation is right now, and if they discuss the life they can't give their family because they don't have a degree, you will dramatically increase your chances of gaining a commitment from the student. Quote, get to their emotions and you will create the urgency. Get to their emotions and you will create the urgency. Is that the way we ought to be enticing young people to go to school? Stoke the pain, stoke the fear? And again, according to the Department of Education, 30% of student loan borrowers at Kaplan default within 3 years of leaving school, and guess what? Kaplan keeps the money. Let me cite just one more example, Corinthian colleges. At Corinthian, recruiters are taught to convince students that their lives are bad and can be improved only by enrolling in the school. As a former recruiter, Mr. Shaler White testified in a lawsuit filed against Corinthian by ex-students. Quote, "The ultimate goal was to essentially make prospective students wallow in their grief, feel that pain of having accomplished nothing in life, and then use that pain to pressure them to enroll. I focused on the blatant exploitation of pain to demonstrate the terrible cynicism that pervades these companies. But the school's recruiting documents also are rife with misrepresentations. From a brochure for Ashford University, owned by Bridgepoint, it says it's established in 1918. Quote, traditional four-year campus with sports teams, dormitories, regionally accredited since 1950. What this means to you is that your degree will be recognized both professionally and academically. That's from Bridgepoint, Ashford University. Well, what it doesn't tell you is that up until 2005, Ashford was a small religious school with 350 students. They were purchased by Bridgepoint, renamed Ashford. 350 students in the end of 2005. Today they have 70,000 students. 70,000 online students with astronomical dropout rates. 67% of Bridgepoint is owned by investment bank and private equity fund Warburg Pincus. Think about that. Private equity firm owns Bridgepoint. They buy this small religious school, 350 students. They put out these things. You can go to this school, great campus and all that, but you're going to school online. Now they have 70,000 students. According to the Department of Education, 21% of student loan borrowers at Ashford's parent company, Bridgepoint, default within 3 years of leaving school. That's a 17% increase in just 1 year. The HELP Committee has heard testimony from experts in college counseling. This testimony details the detrimental effects that such overly aggressive and misleading recruitment can have on the lives of students. When students are enrolled through deception or fear, they are less prepared to meet the challenges of college. Rather than offering students a better life, these types of strong-arm, emotionally abusive tactics are all too typical of schools that have little or no interest in providing students the academic help and the support they need to succeed, for the students to succeed. Perhaps the attitude of these schools towards students is best exposed in a document provided by Vatterott, V-A-T-T-E-R-O-T-T, a privately held for-profit school. Under the heading of emotion, it notes, "We deal with people that live in the moment and for the moment." That's who they're going after. Their decision to start, stay in school, or quit school is based more on emotion than logic. Pain is the greater motivation in the short term. Think about the schools that you're familiar with in your own states. Your private nonprofit schools, some religious-based, then your public schools and your universities. Are they recruiting students like this? You won't find this in any of theirs. They're not going after pain and fear. They're going after students to help and support them when they go to school so that they can have a better life. Well, if this is the attitude, to stoke the fear and to stoke the pain, if that's the attitude of these for-profit colleges, what does it say about its students' chances for success? Is it any wonder that outcomes are appalling, defaults are skyrocketing, accounting for nearly 47% of all student defaults? Mr. President, once again, I have to point out, the for-profit schools enroll about 10% of higher education students in America, but they account for 47% of the defaults. 10% of the students, 47% of the defaults. Mr. President, the bottom line finding of my committee's investigation is that, number one, these schools are very expensive. Number two, they are exploitative. Number three, as these documents show, they are focused on their own success, paying their shareholders if they're publicly held, or paying back their equity investors if they're equity owned. They're not focused on the success of their students. Mr. President, the bottom line is what we are confronting here today with this tremendous explosion in for-profit schools, this tremendous explosion in their enrollment of students. As I said, Ashford, 2005, 350 students, today 70,000 students. The tremendous churning of students that's going on every year. This has a striking resemblance to the subprime crisis that confronted America. A striking resemblance to the subprime crisis. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the documents I referred to be printed at the appropriate place in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I yield the floor.